before the election happened, that there were all these weird pictures of Trump from the back of the head. And I showed them all. I had, you know, so many photos. I think I had maybe like 25, 30 pictures of this. And I would show it to people, and they could not believe that this was happening. It's just Trump from the back. So then we started seeing something interesting happen, which is after the election, they ramped it up even more. And it was going on more and more. And I said, it's almost like, you know, if I were in the Secret Service or something, I would have gone and talked to these people, because in some cases they would put things that it would almost look like targets. And I said, this, you know, the press is going crazy on this. Why are they showing Trump from the back over and over again? But an interesting thing happened. Suddenly, on the Trump side, they started to put out their own pictures of Trump from the back as if to respond to this. And this was the communication that I saw going on in the background. One of them posted by Trump aide Dan Bongino, and you know, this is pretty interesting because when we think of, you know, Trump, we think of somebody who is very plugged in to symbolism. He's, let's say, he's a lot more. He certainly is a lot more aware than he's given credit for around these things. He's supposed to be this kind of guy who blunders into all this stuff. This one I thought was interesting. That is a shot of Trump from the back, but if you look at the shadow, they did an interesting thing with it. Remember, this is coming up from on the Trump side. That's a picture of Batman. You see that one, Olivia?
Wow, that's incredible.
So this is my take. Trump is saying, whatever you're doing with this back of the head stuff, take a good look. Because that's where I'm coming from. Trump took them to the brink. And there's something in that mix when they took the election away from him. What they figured was, you know, I mean, they had a lot of reasons for getting him out. But they also remember that Henry Kissinger and others around Nixon, they had to work on him. What was his biggest fear? Well, in Nixon's case, it was paranoia. And they worked that pretty good. And he undid himself. But Trump, what is Trump? What's the first word that you think of when you think of Trump and what he thinks of himself? He's a winner. Trump is a winner. He says it over and over again. I won this, I won that. I'm a winner, that guy's a loser. This is what he comes out of. That is the kind of, you know, that mixed with the street smarts of Godzilla, that gives you President Trump. So if you can make him a loser by doing these various things, take the election, you might figure, I can get him to so overreact that we get an incident like what happened at the Capitol. But what happened there is very interesting to me because it seemed like they didn't have it. They needed it. They needed a false flag. And what they were able to do was generate. And we know there were very suspicious people involved in that whole thing. And we know for the most part, the people who were part of that million, I mean, you know, in a million group, you get all kinds. And, you know, but we can see over and over again that Trump people have been incredibly peaceful in all of their, you know, stadium shows and everything else. There's never been any violent problems at all. You know, but I say that, you know, I always think about the Red Sox and the Yankees. Whenever the Yankees would come to Fenway to play, you know, their outfielders would be out there. And you'd get some very unsportsmanlike fans. And they'd throw bottles at the outfielders for the Yankees, you know. It would happen sometimes, and they'd have to get that guy and take him out. You know, but there are always people like that in big crowds, which is why you have a police force to push them back. The things that took place there's a lot of organization, and you have to understand the concept of the agent provocateur. There's no question about it. I cited a very interesting story about Martin Luther King because, you know, Martin Luther King had gone and done these poor people's marches, but he had gone to actually represent the sewer workers and do a march with them. The FBI did not like all the things that Martin Luther King was standing for. Of course, it's well known that they tried to kill him on multiple occasions. And at the end of the day, it's pretty clear that the US government had a very handy role in the assassination of King. But what's interesting is all of his marches were peaceful because that's what he told his people to be, because it was a nonviolent revolution, which he achieved, as Gandhi did. But in this one, which was just before he was assassinated, broken windows, firebomb, all kinds of stuff, Molotov cocktails, left and right. He said, what on earth is going on here? And it turned out later, and he got assassinated shortly afterwards, but it turned out later, when they go back and into those records, they find out that the people who were around him, he had been infiltrated by FBI informants. And they had set up people who looked like King supporters walking along, and they turned violent. And what did that do? It gave the ability for federal forces to come down and punch down against him in the Poor People's March, which is what they wanted to do. Because King had turned against the Vietnam War, and they were like, we'll never be able, with his influence over the Black community, to recruit anyone to go to Vietnam. So they sent in agent provocateurs to get a result. And they didn't achieve it completely. And I think in the end, they just said, we're just going to take him out. In the case of Trump, what they want to do, what they've been trying to do, is get a narratives to stick. Russian disinfo agent, Ukraine, manipulation, impeachment, 25th Amendment, whatever it is, nonstop. And, I mentioned Ron Paul. He just did a report about the things that they are pulling on Trump here. And he said, I've been in Washington a long time. I've seen a lot of those stuff. I have never seen this all hands on deck to get Trump for one person. And he said, made me think, even though I didn't agree with certain policies of his, made me think, what is it that he is doing that is getting their ire up so bad? And we are right in the middle of it. And Twitter tonight slashing the president of the United States account. And it's 90 million followers. And it's an incredible affront to any kind of representative democracy or republic. It's insane. It is reaching into insanity, the abyss. It's the CIA. It's their kind of fantasy. Because the CIA is a sick organization run by sick people. And those sick people are now planning with Biden to create domestic terror laws. And what did they do before? They were the same CIA people who said, hey, there's WMD in Iraq, you have to send soldiers in there. You have to send 500,000 people in there. Those were the types of assessments from CIA people that we got. And when we got into Iraq, there was not any weapons of mass destruction. But it framed the neocon vision. And this is what they got. The neocons wanted empire, and it was a disaster. The single greatest foreign policy disaster in United States history, the Iraq War. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We are going deep now on X, year one. And this is going to get now the full picture of COG and the communications, continuity of government. We're going to be taking your questions here shortly. And Miss Olivia, how's the temperature out there?
Really fast. We have tons of people on the chat tonight.
That's great. It is great to see so many people here with us.
It's wonderful. It's a great way to start 2021.
Yes. Do you have something?
So the Ground Cap wants to know, do you think that the assault on the Capitol was, quote, allowed to happen? And Hill Doggy Dog wants to know, what do you make of the temporary occupation? Heroes fed up or people who made bad decisions?
You always get some of those. There'll always be people like that around. But if you have, if you have 1 million people coming to town, you're going to have security to the teeth. They remember what the Black Lives Matter people did. They were trying to attack the White House. They firebombed a city, right? They set the whole place on fire. They're ready for this kind of thing. Now, they may not expect that because the Trump people haven't exhibited those problems, but you'd have an incredibly robust force. Everybody looking at it who is a sensible person on the foreign policy side, on the police side, who knows Washington. You know, a lot of those people said, look, I work in those buildings. When you go in somewhere, you've got to check in with a code, even if you're staff. Each time you go in and out that door, you got to check in with a code. There's no way to walk around in people's offices. It does not happen. My own feeling about this, thinking about the agent provocateur aspect, it's very clear that people were waved in. We've seen those videos. There's no good explanation for them. But then once they were in, there are weird things. This is what I noticed, because I know a lot about stock photography, because I used to run a magazine. And I know a lot about Getty. Getty, in some of those earliest pictures, they have their photographers there shooting the protesters inside the Capitol. Technically, you could say that Getty is also criminally trespassing. What are they doing there? Well, it was interesting to me because as the stuff was breaking, I noticed that one of the pictures that came up, and it was a picture for sale from Getty, and it was from the actual protesters inside. How does that work? You know, handoff, fumble, run it down the other team's 10-yard line into the end zone, you're done. That's pretty fast work. How do you get Getty images in there, taking images and then putting them up for sale? Doesn't make any sense. They knew. There's all kinds of strange things. There's, of course, the Capitol Police taking selfies with people. And then there's obviously another group that doesn't know anything that's going on, and they start shooting at protesters. And there was some tragedy there. But look, when I started dark journalism, I learned something. This is what I learned. There are always these three aspects in any story. And anyone who's familiar with my work knows this, so I'm going to go through it anyway, for those who aren't. There's the official story, or official lie. There's the secondary, the counter story, which is often called a conspiracy theory by the media because they don't want people to go there. But in fact, it's usually looked into by professors, writers, researchers who are like, this doesn't add up. Here's what it looks like really happened. I got this document, shows that. This video shows that. The secondary story is often the key to the whole thing. But what happens, there's a third level that grows up, which is junk conspiracy. The junk conspiracy so overwhelms the secondary story that people go back to the official story because it's hard. They say, you know, that's too crazy. Like, I believe something was wrong, but I don't know how to go that far out. The junk conspiracy is very often perpetrated by the people who put out the official story in the first place. So, you know, the junk conspiracy, flat Earth, for example. The driver shot JFK. You know, these types of things. There were problems with the Secret Service and the drivers in the JFK case, but the driver didn't shoot JFK. They had shooting teams to kill a prize target. But you need to understand the levels because the official story around 9/11 is, you know, some guys hijacked planes. And, you know, because we have nuclear rules about things like that, about a country coming in here, like our nuclear power, Russia or something, if our planes get hijacked and fly over the Capitol, they get dealt with. You know, it's not the kind of thing where like, hey, wake up the defense secretary. Oh, he's not awake. He hasn't had his coffee. You know, it's absurd. So we know that that story was BS. You know, if you bicycle too close to the Pentagon, the security force would grab you because, you know, they know that people can go by with transceivers and things like that. So, you know, it just doesn't happen. You're never going to fly a plane into the Pentagon. They have all kinds of ways and means of preventing that from happening. So the official story that someone in a cave ran these protesters, Middle Eastern radicals, to take down the entire air defense system of the United States is absurd. But that's the official story. But even the people who are on the commission said, well, they won't talk to us under oath about this. What's going on? This doesn't add up. The secondary story brought out by researchers, etc., is that there was awareness about a situation, and they either allowed it to happen or contributed to it. And there was a lot of research, very good research, including Professor Peter Dale Scott, David Ray Griffin, and others. I think Professor Scott's analysis of the hijackers as designated culprits is historically incredibly important. And then the junk conspiracy is the planes were holograms. Not because holograms are a junk conspiracy, but in this particular case, it's pretty clear there were planes involved, maybe missiles also. So those three levels, when you get into the third one, the junk conspiracy, people can't sit with that. They're like, what do you mean the planes didn't exist? You know, then they go back to the official story. And, you know, the JFK assassination is clear. The official story that Lee Harvey Oswald, a disgruntled communist, which isn't true, because we know he worked for right-wingers, gets a job for $1.25, stacking boxes at a place where no one realizes that President Kennedy is going to drive by there in 6 weeks. Certainly not Oswald. So he just so happens to do that, and then just so happens to bring a gun and to shoot President Kennedy. And he gets 7 shots, 7 wounds from 3 shots in 8 seconds, or 5.6 seconds. It's just, you know, so that's the official story. It's completely absurd. Magic bullets and all that kind of thing. It's like the magic virus. It's the official story. Then the secondary story is pretty clear, that the CIA had very deep reasons for eliminating President Kennedy, and incredible people came forward to prove that, like DA Jim Garrison and so on. The third level, the junk conspiracy start, you know, they get into that. They were like, well, Jackie did it, or the driver did it, you know, this type of nonsense. And it drives people away from looking at the case. You know, a Secret Service agent did it. He took out a machine gun and killed Kennedy and then felt bad about it. You know, just ridiculous stuff. You know, backtrack it to assassination teams. And, you know, there's rich, incredibly rich research showing the security stripping, first of all, of President Kennedy by the Secret Service agents being called off the back of the car. That, you know, it's very obvious that when you take them off, it's because you want a better shot. So whoever's in charge of that, by the way, and setting up that trip was a Secret Service agent named Winston Lawson. And what did he do? Well, he worked with White House COG emergency communications. Professor Scott was shocked when he read his testimony. He said, oh, he's lying over and over again. Then he was like, wait a minute, he's using COG communications setting up the trip, and he's using it while he's in Dallas. The thing about the COG communications is no one can ever track it. It can't be taped. The FBI can't tape you. It's an ultra secret communications network. And so when Professor Scott tracked it down, he found every deep American event from Watergate to the JFK assassination to 9/11 all included continuity of government players. John Dean, continuity of government player. One of the Watergate burglars, continuity of government. Oliver North, Iran-Contra, set up continuity of government in the 80s. Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, when they were out of government. Cheney was a CEO of a pharmaceutical company. This is what the tapestry is of COG, the incredible power of that level of secrecy. You know, it's my contention that they took the rules around COG and they applied them to space, which is where the secret space program and all that came from. And of course, there's a lot of junk conspiracy around that as well. So now let's look at what they're doing with COG in relation to this situation. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We're going deep now, X year 1. This is our first show of the new year 2021, starting things off with a bang. We saw Twitter censor President Trump tonight by removing his account and his 90 million followers on that platform. An incredible affront to free speech and open engagement against the President of the United States, and that's against all of us. So when we think about this, you know, these companies definitely have gone too far, and through things like Section 230, we need to put the pressure on our representatives to get that in hand, and also to find new platforms in which for us to participate in. We're going to be taking your questions here in just 1 minute. And Miss Olivia, how are you doing out there?
Good. So just to finish that up, David Lee says DC was a Reichstag fire-style false flag event to complete the coup and bury the steal. What say you?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, it was a deep event for sure. And we went through, I mean, some people have a list going on these things, and it's remarkable already. We won't even know the full extent of what happened there for a little while, but we can already see that there's some very, very unusual things that are taking place. Speaking of unusual things, I know this has been a very serious night, but you know, sometimes that's the way it goes, right? All right, let's finish off the censorship conversation and then get to the heart of the matter with COG and then take your questions. Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay. All right, now tonight also, breaking, Apple threatens to remove Parler from its App Store. Here's the other piece of this operation. Now, you can say, well, you know what? Twitter is completely unconstitutional. They don't believe in free speech. I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going to another platform. And, you know, they had kind of a monopoly on this because that's what happens. And these type of kind of stock investors, they consolidate and all this money goes behind these different companies and the CIA gets involved and all the rest. Now, let's take a look at this. These other systems start to thrive. Gab, Parler, BitChute. They're kind of like how YouTube was when it started, which is great, which is why I liked it in the first place. It was an open forum. This is bonkers. You know, and this is very important too. I mean, Gigi Young knows this, is out there because she's done her YouTube channel for a long time. And I wanted to say congratulations on 75,000 subscribers to the incredible work that you do. You know, I've always thought that Gigi Young's work was shadow banned. Our work, of course, you know, a lot of these different channels are suppressed, but nonetheless, to get to those levels, it's fantastic and very deep. But you can say, you know, if you go back and ask somebody who was on YouTube in 2010 or something, 2011, totally different world. And that's what attracted me to it in the first place. And these types of fascist rules that are being placed are the same types of things that got me out of the kind of mainstream corporate world and to doing this, because this was so much more important, that free flow. Now they've taken that free flow and they've brought in the fascism and controlling what you say to a degree I could never even dream possible in 2010, honestly. The type of fascist moves that they've made in the last year are just unfathomable for a lot of us. But this tonight, silencing the President of the United States, instead of just disagreeing with him or putting out your own statement, I don't agree with that, I'm just going to unplug him. It's insane. It's beyond insane. And you're using a massive media machine to whip that up, because if you're part of this deep state, World Economic Forum, dollar syndicate, China takeover, you have got to control the media. You have got to wind up enough people with false stories. And so they have to think populism's bad. They're domestic terrorism. I'm safer with corporate people and the deep state protecting me. The CIA is great. Well, they're not so great, unfortunately. It's too bad. It'd be nice if they were, but unfortunately, they went over a line a long time ago, kind of when they were created. And we've been trying to rein them back in ever since. It hasn't gone so well. But this, you're going to find over and over again, CIA people popping up in the middle of it. And I do want to point out that Gina Haspel has been missing in sight since before the election. And I do think it's very unusual. And I understand that CIA agents keep a low profile unless, directors, unless they're John Brennan, of course, who has to be on MSNBC every day. Unbelievable, this guy. And now he's deep into like, hey, we need UFO disclosure. Yeah, we really want UFO disclosure from the Drone King. I like that idea. No thanks. Okay, I wanted to point this out too, which is our friend Alexandra Bruce, of course. There she is for Forbidden Knowledge TV. Twitter zapped her as well as part of this purge just going around. And, you know, you can go to forbiddenknowledgetv.com and sign up for her newsletter and follow her stuff. She'll continue doing it. She only did Twitter as a lark anyway, but still for them, you know, Twitter can't handle the truth. This is what it comes down to. And they can't be challenged. And that type of thinking is something that, you know, the March of Freedom in America threw out a long time ago. And we threw it out with the Nazis too. And it's just not who we are about. And we're not going to be like that. And this thing that is trying to gain steam and force us to accept these arbitrary restrictions on speech and where you can go. In the UK, it's even much worse. You know, they have these new rules. You can't stop moving if you go out. If you stop moving, there's a SWAT team on you. I mean, there's a certain point where people are going to throw this off. And, you know, that is ugly when it gets thrown off because you're repressing people and then they kick back on you. But this is what happens. And that is, you know, humans are meant to be free and you can't repress them with police state thug tactics. My recommendation is that, you know, we do it peacefully and we push back because they lose all their energy and oxygen. They actually like violent confrontation. So when a strong group comes at them in a non-violent fashion, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with RFK Jr. Scares the hell out of them. Are you kidding? He's on their level and he's exposing their game. And he's a Kennedy. It's terrifying. Dealing with the vaccine, which is one of their key ops, they want to get everyone vaccinated. You know, now Fauci's out there saying, oh, I misled everybody. I originally said it was 60% just to get everyone used to the idea. Now I think it's 85% who need to get vaccinated. This psychopathic liar. Really? Would you put that guy in charge of anything? Remember when he said, you don't need the silly mask? And then later he said, oh no, I lied because I wanted to save the mask for healthcare workers. Well, one, that's BS. Because if you knew there was a virus out there and that masks protected people, you couldn't put yourself in a position like that. And two, if your crazy scenario was true, which we know it isn't, then you just told people, you know, you sentenced them to get this terrible thing by telling them not to get a mask. You know, hello jail time. I mean, hello medical negligence. This is really, these people are putting incredible things in public, you know, and I need to say this gracefully because of all the things that have happened. But, you know, you wonder with the amount of stuff that they pull that they, you know, that they haven't experienced more difficulty, put it to that way. You know, because it is incredible the kind of naked aggression that is taking place and that they think, you know, they're giddy because in those back rooms, everyone is telling each other, we can do this, we have the power, we have the technology, we have the money. But you hit hard against reality too. And, you know, my recommendation to them would be to back off and take the incredible benefits they've reaped of billions of dollars, locking people down, destroying their businesses. Before there's, you know, when things are top heavy, what do? They topple over. Those people on the top, what happens to them? Ask Mussolini. It's very simple. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. A couple of quick things here on COG communication and then a rush to your questions. I'm definitely going to get to those, and I do appreciate them and the ideas from tonight. We have a great crowd, and I love those. By the way, Ben Garrison It's been doing the greatest comics in the world. But I thought this one was particularly good. It's all about the election, and it's got official president-select Biden, and he says, "Shut the damn curtain," and he's using the Wizard of Oz theme, and it's called The Wizard of Fraud, and they have Trump there as a dog with his blonde hair and everything, and then the deep state with the voting booth.
That's great. Where did this appear?
That's Ben Garrison, he
That's
does all the
great.
political comics. But this guy, and he is on Twitter and Parler and places like that. I highly recommend him. Just, boy, can that guy capture a vibe. All right, here's the political director of ABC News talking about cleansing America of Trump supporters. Political director of ABC News. That's where he's coming from. Cleansing. Yeah. But where have we heard that before? Germany, 1939. It fits the bill. He deleted the tweet. Well, he got caught up in the moment, I guess. Okay, Melissa Slotkin, one to watch. We pointed her out. Now, let's get into the COG battle here and what Nancy is doing with this whole thing. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, 81 years old, and I know some incredibly well-functioning 81 people in their 80s. I mean, can be fantastic. But she is not one of them, and neither is Biden. And because of the type of lifestyle that they've had, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever kind of bizarreness that they've had, it's just not there anymore. So she comes out and she's going through the different people that should object to Trump, and she goes, Christopher Miller, the defense secretary. And she's going through this, and she said, well, he's an acting defense secretary. I don't know exactly. She starts to get lost. And then she goes, how can Attorney General Barr put up with this? And she goes, Attorney General Barr, and her eyes are out of her head, right? And we all know Attorney General Barr resigned December 23rd. He's out of there. But Nancy's only talking about this today. So she doesn't know that there's a new Attorney General. That's the Speaker of the House. Someone comes up to her, runs up to her with a note, and then she goes, oh, and the current Attorney General, and the person with the note runs up and saves her. But, this is what we're talking about. These people are corrupt, and they're, because, you would think new leadership would be coming in, young people taking over, and learning from the wisdom of older people, whatever. Instead, these people are clinging on because of the level of secrecy and corruption that they have. And, she's just a deranged presence on the scene. Okay, now here's the headline after the incident at the Capitol. I wanted to show this picture. That is the Getty. That's a Getty photographer there. And that is the person doing the wild pose in the chamber. How does he get up there? No, and also not get arrested, and then put up the pictures for sale shortly afterwards. It's a Wi-Fi card. It's pretty strange. What is Getty doing in there? How do they get the access to? They have all these Getty stock photo watermarks on the images. Incredible. Okay, Pelosi confers with top general on preventing unhinged Trump from launching nuclear strike. Yes, that's Nancy talking about unhinged, I kid you not. So actually, it's interesting because the headline is very deceptive. Because in fact, she went to General Milley and was like, how do I prevent a unhinged president from having access to the nuclear codes? First of all, it's very clear. The president is the only one with access to the nuclear codes, okay? That is what gets transferred during every administration. So it's not like the Speaker of the House has any access or anything around the nuclear codes, unless through the succession of government, the top of the government, gets taken out and the Speaker of the House assumes the presidency, and then she would have access to things like that. But as a Speaker of the House, you don't get that access at all. So when she comes back, she's like, I learned of various ways to restrain. It's basically like, you know, it's like a barista at Starbucks or something saying like, you know, I'm the CEO now and I'll tell the CEO what to do. I mean, you know, the fact is that there's a narrative, there's like a weird narrative that's building up here. And they keep bringing nuclear into it. Mark that, sort of give us a little highlight on that. It's unusual for them to be talking that way because there are foreign countries looking at us. And you wouldn't start to want to give the impression that the nuclear codes were in the wrong hands, now would you? That would be incredibly irresponsible. Why would you do that? Even as a political tool, there are tons of other ways to challenge your opponent who's president. Would you really make the nuclear part front and center if you were responsible Speaker of the House, understanding foreign policy and the ability of others to take advantage of us? Okay, here's the next irresponsible piece. House Democrats to introduce articles of impeachment against Trump. Articles to accuse President of inciting insurrection. This is interesting because when BLM was blowing everything up over the summer, including the Capitol, and setting everything on fire and all that stuff and destroying businesses, everyone who was sort of hardcore against this were like, President should invoke the Insurrection Act. And now it's very strange because, you know, a psychopath, well, have you ever dealt with a psychopath? Politically, personally, whatever it is. Whatever you say to them, they will come back and say, they will repeat your words with the problem. So, you know, it's a weird thing, and you can recognize it here. What they're doing is they're taking the stuff that, you know, about insurrection. They're like, oh, you know, like we were celebrating the BLM riots, but we'll call this insurrection so we can get all these legislation policy initiatives against it. But, you know, who's falling for it? Who's smart? Really? So the smart people know. And Roosevelt Media has it right. He said that's gaslighting. Exactly. More than 150 House Democrats, well over half of the caucus, have signed on to articles of impeachment against President Trump. Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she spoke with Joint Chiefs Chairman about the president's mental fitness. This is good. This is rich stuff. But what is the real battle? What's really happening there? Well, recently there was this FCC enforcement advisory. Remember, everything tonight is about communications and censorship. Twitter is about Trump talking to 90 million people without the media filter. And they're worried. They're like, oh, he can get his message out without all this stuff we put all over it, calling him Hitler and all this stuff. If he's just talking to people, then what? Remember when Trump came out and said, I think you should all go home peacefully, and they removed the tweet and they said it was violent incitement to violence? I mean, but because they removed the tweet, if people don't see the tweet, then they think, well, maybe he said something bad, right? Well, I was watching in real time. A lot of us were. We know what it was. Other people went and put up the video because they saved it. So it's stupid. It's like you're going to do things that you know can be unraveled, but you're hoping you can control the news cycle so much and just come up with every crazy thing every day that the things that get proven wrong won't come back to bite you. Well, here I am to bite you. All right, the Enforcement Bureau reminds emergency alert systems, pay close attention, EAS, participants of compliance obligations. This is very key. The Enforcement Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission, Commission of SEC, issues this enforcement advisory to remind broadcasters, cable TV operators, wireless cable operators, wireline video services, and they go on down the line. Basically, that you have to be up to date with this, and you have to be up to date with that. And basically, if you're not, then you get zapped until you're compliant. They're worried about things outside of the scope of their control, communications-wise. So in here, I have to insert a bridge, a speculative bridge, and then on the other side of that bridge, more facts. One thing before I go for the speculative bridge. Executive Order Assignment of National Security and Emergency Preparedness Communications and Functions. That was actually prepared under the Obama administration. Assignment of National Security, Emergency Preparedness Communications functions. Here we go. The federal government must have the ability to communicate at all times under all circumstances to carry out its most critical and time-sensitive missions. Survivable, resilient, enduring, and effective communications, both domestic and international, are essential to enable the executive branch to communicate within itself and with the legislative and judicial branches, state, local, territorial, tribal governments, private sector entities, the public, allies, and other nations. I'm glad the public is so far down there, right? Such communications must be possible under all circumstances to ensure national security. Those communications have to be open. The views of all levels of government, private and nonprofit sectors, and the public must inform the development of national security and emergency preparedness, communications policies, programs, and capabilities. Trump is the president. If he has something, here's the speculative bridge. The information is coming out of Italy now about a military industrial aerospace company named Leonardo. Remember, aerospace is always deep, deep in the control of the deep state. So there are people coming forward and saying submitted to Congress and kept are the fact that there were these hackers that were involved with the CIA operation, and it ended up turning into a vote invasion operation of the United States in the 2020 election. And what they have with this, as opposed to just some random story that floats around, they have the people who were held for this, and then an affidavit from a person who was one of the hackers in Italy. And this person who was reporting this is part of a small group who's breaking this story. They've come over here, they submitted things to Washington, and they've given a few interviews under kind of tightly controlled circumstances. This thing is not widely out there yet. You have some of the people like Patrick Byrne, for example, who's the Overstock CEO, who had a meeting with the president and has a tendency to be very well informed about a lot of these issues. He's somebody who said, there's smoke, there's fire where there's that smoke. He's somebody, along with other people, who are pointing to this. So here's the speculative bridge. The president has something and can announce it. And what they've done is they've become aware that Trump has something which would either embarrass the government or would put the results of the 2020 election in shadow, a number of things. And they realize they need to shut off every means of communication, Twitter, Facebook. The press won't cover him. And if he is isolated, then this word won't get out to the public. And if he does choose to push that red button and put this out, then they'll make up some excuse and say he was secretly planning for violence, we arrested him. And there's no communication structure to support what he says and all the rest. Now, they were talking about how the incident at the Capitol was a coup. We see this in the mainstream news stories. It's absolutely absurd. First of all, a coup is done quietly among groups to take over the government. The top officer of the government is Trump. So you can't coup yourself. Right now, President Trump is the head of the government, whether Twitter likes it or not. So, theoretically, if someone else got inaugurated, like Joe Biden, on January 20th, and Trump did something, then that would be a coup attempt. But this can't be a coup attempt. Doesn't make sense. There's no logic. These are journalists. They're trained in journalism. They're using the term because they're under influence. That's not a logical thing to apply to a situation like this. You would say frustrated voters who couldn't get what they felt was the truth about the election stormed the Capitol, and the police let them all in. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that just don't play out very well, do they, when we think about this? Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist show. It is 11:11 here in Boston. And, you know, it's interesting because I want to take a moment out here and point out that what's been going on in the background is a lot about emergency communications, and there's no more important line of communications than the continuity of government communications line, which Ollie North sold the Iranian missiles to, and no one could figure out how that happened, which was used during the Kennedy administration, but then also used by Secret Service agents on the day of the assassination, and which has been used in 9/11 and other times. That communication network can emergency broadcast anywhere in the United States and greater North America and to our allies at any time. So the control over having that COG command communication center is more likely what we're seeing the struggle over here between the forces trying to take Trump down and Trump maintaining his unusual position in all this. And to go along with that, U.S. cyber attack, U.S. Energy Department confirms it was hit by sunburst. You remember this story from a couple of weeks ago. Oh, the Russians hit everything that we have. They might have access to all this stuff. Department of Treasury, oh, all this information. U.S. cyber attack, U.S. Energy Department confirms it was hit by sunburst hack. Well, they had problems getting the story going. And so what they decided to do was use, you know what, Nancy Pelosi's laptop was hanging out, and these infiltrators came in and grabbed her laptop. And they have all this secret stuff. And this is another thing where they can say, well, we need to reset these codes. We need to take these extraordinary precautions. These domestic terrorists are now threatening our infrastructure. This is where that seems like this is going. This is where we're starting to see that. And if you remember in continuity of government, the way we've talked about it, in Professor Scott's research, that communication channel is called the Doomsday Network. And that Doomsday Network is set up to survive a nuclear emergency, but you can use it for anything. So is that what we're looking at here in terms of the command, control, communications? You shut Trump off Twitter, Facebook, all the social media, and not just him. There's an incredible night of the long knives taking place in social media. So they're concerned about something. They need to shut off any access point for these stories to get out. You know what happens when a fascist country, takes over a country, a different country? Those forces, what do they lock up immediately? Radio. Radio is number one. They can't afford to have that word spread before they have their command structure in place. That's what this feels like. Now, a lot of this is also this incredible censorship on the surface. So even if you want to just look at it on a surface level, this is what we're under. And finally, on the COG take, these are the four levels of COG, and it's COG-CON. I'll just highlight them real briefly, and then we'll take your questions. COG-CON 4, federal executive branch government employees at their normal work locations maintain alternate facility and conduct periodic continuity readiness exercises. When the Capitol attack, if you can call it that, when the Capitol event took place, they took Congress, where did they take them? It's very interesting because the place that they took them, the fort that they took them, is the continuity of government location. That's where they were taken. So they activated COG again in this deep event. We've been seeing COG, and I've been reporting on it because, you know, I'll tell you, when I used to report or read about COG, no one ever talked about it. You'd never read anything about it in magazines or newspapers or websites. It just was not a topic. Professor Scott talked about it. William Arkin. You know, but this was not common stuff. And in fact, whenever it had come up in Congress, they would always freak out and say, we can't talk about that. So this is the nature of it. But in the middle of this whole thing, they took them there, which I find interesting, considering the entire situation. Okay, COG 3. Federal agencies and departments' advanced relocation teams warm up their alternate sites and capabilities, which include testing, communications, and IT systems. Ensure that alternate facilities are prepared to receive continuity staff, track agency leaders and successors daily. COG 2, this is orange. Deployment of 50 to 70% of emergency relocation group continuity staff to alternate locations, establish their ability to conduct operations and prepare to perform their organization's essential functions in the event of a catastrophic emergency. COG 1, full deployment of designated leadership and continuity staffs to perform the organization's essential functions from alternate facilities, either as a result of or in preparation for a catastrophic emergency. So the way that I look at this is, obviously, you know, it's not like a massive earthquake or EMP or something has hit the United States, but COG is all over the place. So they're preparing for something. And even in this incident, again, you see Congress relocated to a COG site. But Congress and COG was mentioned in that Newsweek article where I had the fight online with William Arkin, who flipped out that I identified as source. So there's something in the COG part being raised. And I remember Dr. Farrell mentioned in a show that we did that when Trump got COVID in the middle of the election there, something like 3 weeks out from the vote, that the video that came out of Trump looked like he was on a ship because things were moving around in the background. And it made people wonder what was really going on. And then when the election was over, who did he fire? The defense secretary. And then on November 18th, what happened? He activated John F. Kennedy's National Security Action Memorandum 57, which separated Pentagon support from the CIA and basically stripped the CIA of drones and all kinds of other things. When did that go into effect? January 5th. When did all this deep event Capitol stuff happen? January 6th. So we can't, the combination of the COG factors mixed with what we're seeing play out in these deep events, which they're trying to cause new legislation that's repressive and change the nature of the country. Here in the United States, we need to be aware of it, but our allies around the world do as well. But here in America, you know, we still have some control over this government. And this is what needs to be brought to the fore to prevent these dangerous people from attempting this dangerous thing that they're attempting. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. This is a deep dive into COG, and I hope I've given you, you know, the facts. It's funny with COG, and I always do the setup shows, and you can refer to some of my earlier episodes. And the Doomsday Network interview with Professor Scott is on this channel. We're going to be taking your questions here, so I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Olivia.
You're all set?
Yes, I want to remind everyone to go to darkjournalist.com and sign up for our free newsletter, because we know that with all the wilds and frankless things that I'm talking about, they just might have to pull my channel down. But if they do, it's better if we have that communication going back and forth. And basically, all that happens is you get a newsletter about once a week, and it'll let you know what incredible events and interviews that we have coming up for you. And let me tell you, January is going to be. I mean, the world is already doing it, but we have some incredible things lined up for you. We did not end up doing X100 tonight with all this going on, obviously, but X100 is coming up next week, and that is a
Maybe. We'll see.
three-part episode, and we're going to blow some people out of the water with that. Okay, yes.
Okay, Sophia J says, is COG backing Biden/deep state? And Kalanu Arte says, is there any way to disband the COG? So it's kind
This
of,
is a very
you can't really
interesting-
get rid of it, can you?
This is a very interesting question. COG is a function, so you can infiltrate it with your side, but it's basically fundamentally a neutral function. So you'd have traditional people, you know, this guy's an army specialist, this guy is somebody who's good at communications, this guy knows nuclear deterrent, and you bring those people together, and we have an incredible background to that. It functions as a shadow government. They even admit that on the government website. The thing is that there were signals that COG was being activated during the COVID crisis back in March of 2020. And the star of that show was Terrence O'Shaughnessy. And William Arkin of Newsweek, hate to bring him up again, but there he was. He was saying, look, everyone needs to get to know the name of the combatant commander of the United States because he might be the guy who's running the show. Because if Pence and Trump get COVID, this is one of their plans. It was a trial balloon that they floated out there. So I believe the O'Shaughnessy side is, you know, the way that they were promoting him. And I can't say anything about him personally, but it is the position that, you know, they were appealing to him on. So that, to me, is a deep state trial balloon about how to get rid of Trump without having to fix the election. That was one avenue. Now, on the communication side, President Trump made some very interesting switches after the election. Defense Secretary Esper was one of them. But Ezra Cohen, who is the person who activated JFK's National Security Action Memorandum on November 18th, and I mean, he activated the JFK thing, but he works there now. You know, he's a guy in his 30s. He got promoted, as did some others. And it seems to me that the continuity of government players, that it can be infiltrated by either side. I'll put it to you that way. And that Trump is certainly aware of that. And I feel like one of the big things they're trying to do is not give him the ability to have that. So if he, let's do another bridge of speculation here. Let's suppose it was the UFO file that he's like, you know, this is very interesting because there are aides who said, you know what? He was looking at releasing all of the JFK information and the UFO file before he left. It's an extraordinary claim, but it came out. And this is also something that happened before all this. It came out about 3 days before this all happened. So we're looking at a weird situation there where what is it that Trump might put out that they don't want him to be able to communicate? Because it sure isn't incitements to violence, because Trump has never done that. And as a matter of fact, I mean, Pelosi and the Democrats, they, you know, when the whole BLM thing was going on, they were using all kinds of terms like that. So, no, we have to think about why they would want to shut down his communication. And the COG part, I think, answers it in part, for sure. Yes.
Okay, Debbie Callygirl says, you never answered why Nancy Pelosi wants Trump impeached. Could you get more clear about that?
Well, this is exactly what I just mentioned, relates directly to that. The same reason Twitter removes him permanently. The same reason Facebook removes him. The same reason they get rid of the Shopify store and all that. They don't want Trump to have any avenues of communication. That's why the COG communications platform, I believe, is so important. It's an emergency broadcast network. Trump's very aware of it. So Nancy needs all kinds of weird things, right? She needs, oh, he's dangerous. He's around the nuclear codes. Impeach him. 25th Amendment. Anything to get him out before the 20th. Because the Italian story could break. Leonardo Aerospace. Maybe there is more fire in that story. Maybe it is a game changer. And I could speculate here about the UFO file, even the JFK files should completely flush the CIA if they're ever released. So the fact is, it's not just Nancy. It's all hands on deck. Trump's got 12 days. Well, you know, there's a lot of commentators who are just like, what's the big deal? You know, you wait less than 2 weeks and you get your guy in according to your story. So what's the problem? Is it just political points? Would you mention nuclear codes? Something very strange about it. And I plan to have Dr. Farrell come on here and give us his best take on it, because that's what we're waiting for.
So what they're saying in the chat is that if he's impeached, he cannot run for president again. And that's really what they're afraid of.
Yes, I would agree with that, because they could find themselves in 4 years in a very similar situation, especially if they try to pull off the disaster of a Biden administration. And there's a lot of reasons why that's disastrous, because it's supposed to be. That is one of the things that Catherine Fitz at Solari pointed out, is Biden's supposed to go in there and finish the job of destroying Main Street. So Main Street got destroyed because of the COVID thing, but it could be rebuilt fast because Trump knows that economy real well. He built the best economy that we ever had. Even his enemies will concede that. Obama had 2.2% economic growth, 1.9. You know, and they said, well, it's not going to grow. But Trump did the America First thing. He had a tough trade policy with China, and things did improve. Black unemployment improved dramatically. Latino unemployment improved dramatically. A rising tide lifts all boats. It's not like his economy was perfect, and you know, there were all kinds of things in there with Trump's policies that you could improve, but there's no question that the economy was doing remarkably well. So he would be the man to rebuild the economy. But if you want to go into this other thing, where you don't want people to have that kind of success and freedom and inspiration, and you want them to be dark winter. Oh, I'm going into this, and old man Joe is going to help me out. And don't worry, Kamala Harris will be there. She's giving more speeches than he is. Freedom indeed. Okay, yes.
Okay, so Tricky Vicky wants me to ask you this question. I was planning to anyway. Could part 2 of the Italy story that Maria Zack said she could not disclose yet is the why they are after Trump so hard would stun the world to the core? Alien presence?
Well, they're an aerospace group. The idea basically, to connect the dots on this one, more is going to come out about that story, so we'll be able to report it deeper. But fundamentally, the story is hackers associated with this military aerospace company in Italy. During the course of being kind of caught for doing that, it was learned that they were working with the CIA to help throw this election. That story, the full gist of that story needs to come out. However, the timing of that story and the timing of this making sure that Trump gets out before the 20th is just, it's one of those things. Again, it seems like a variable factor that they can't control. Whenever the deep state gets a variable they freak out and they risk everything. And that's what they're doing here. And the question is, we can stop them by being aware and pointing it out. That's why they're throwing people off left and right on Twitter, because they are sharing information. The Reddit groups following Trump, they get thrown off, but they're also throwing off other groups. They're throwing off people on the left, off YouTube and other places. It's remarkable. As soon as somebody mentions the Capitol nonsense, or as soon as somebody mentions that the voter totals don't add up, or if they mention their alternatives, and here's a doctor tell you on the COVID thing, this was exaggerated and they gave us the wrong models and lockdowns don't work and masks don't work. And ivermectin would have worked and the vaccine doesn't, it causes problems. Persona non grata, get them out. So we have a problem in America as far as communication is concerned. We need to guarantee for the citizens and for the leadership and for responsible experts to come forward to have those channels of expression that are unhindered. That's what the free speech in the Constitution is about. They understood it. They understood it real well because King George tried to take that away from them. That was the first thing he tried to take away from them. And they were like, enshrine it in there in the Constitution. Make it ironclad. You can't assign us a religion. You can't take away our speech. That's the First Amendment. Rule number 1. Free speech. Don't ever give it up for any reason. Yes.
Josh Randall, are computers, cell phones, iPads, etc., are deep state surveillance devices?
Yes.
How will we ever organize without being squashed like bugs?
There are ways and means and processes for avoiding eavesdropping by whether it's software companies eavesdropping on you. You know, sometimes when you talk about something and then the ad shows up on Facebook, they're listening to you. Siri is listening. So, you know, just on a fundamental basis, what about all those people who, you know, Alexa got hacked or their security cameras get hacked and they find the hackers are looking at them? I mean, there are fundamental reasons besides all of this stuff to have a total different layer of transparency that, you know, secures you and your personal effects. But the cell phone is like a tracker, and you know, the iPhone, all these different phones, they're very easy to be tracked. The thing is, even on those phones though, VPNs, you know, Firefox is really good at not allowing trackers. There's a lot of different ways to do those things that are just basic fundamental that improve the situation immediately. Just like when people use DuckDuckGo instead of Google, they're not tracked. So it's a change of mindset also. And sometimes we think, oh, what does it all matter? They can track us anyway. Well, we can apply, it's interesting with application because as you apply one thing, other things open up. So what is it that we can apply in a sensible fashion to address this? The same thing with protests or, you know, getting legislatures to pay attention. You know, we put this out there over and over again. Violence is never the way to go because that's the easiest thing. John Lennon used to say, they know how to crack heads, you know, because all these youth movement people used to come to him and go, let's do this thing, you know, let's go to Miami and mess up the Republican convention. And he would say, they're just going to crack your head. That's what they know how to do. They have the weapons and, you know, you're just going to be a sitting duck. That doesn't do anything. So, I mean, there are better reasons to avoid any kind of violent confrontation. But force, you know, there's force in an email. There's force in a thought. There's force in a conversation. When they come up with this whole thing about don't wear a mask and all the rest of it, you know, to the best of your ability, unless you feel that there's a situation where you need to wear a mask, I would not wear it. I would think that that's an enslavement device. And some of the best minds that I know think exactly the same thing. Alex Berenson, ex-New York Times reporter who couldn't put up with the lies anymore, he looked into it. He did all the studies. He said, you know what? I've gone through all the scientific studies. There is no study that says masks do anything as far as COVID is concerned. And just as the COVID is wearing off, they're like, aha, the variant. We've got the variant. You get part 2 in Dark Winter with Joe and his corrupt son and the Hunter Biden laptop that they hid and all the crime associated with that. I mean, it's it's a mess, and it needs to be, it needs to be addressed. And also, and I think that this is something that some great voices out there, who you've seen on this program, like Catherine Austin Fitz, Gigi Young, Dr. Farrell, this is what they talk about. Creating, Fitz was all over us for years about creating a healthy food source, not dealing with the banks, finding a credit union instead, moving that money, moving the culture, a local, sustainable, local currencies. This is where things need to go. Yes.
So, Alien Scientist wants to know, what if Biden starts cracking down on all conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists? And Marco Zerpa wants to know, are we getting close to a civil war?
Well, this is the funny thing. The second question is, forget about civil war. You're getting closer to the Revolutionary War. They're acting like King George, and we are the repressed, those who are being repressed by the incredible draconian acts of King George. So they're trying to make it, and they keep evoking Abe Lincoln imagery. You'll notice that too. But in fact, it's not the Civil War. It's the Revolutionary War. They like the Civil War idea because, again, the missing trillions belong to what? They belong to the United States. If you break up the entity of the United States, what happens to that liability? It disappears because the United States isn't connected anymore. So when somebody says, oh, it's like the 1860s, say, no, it's like the 1770s. That's what it feels more like. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We're going to take a couple more of your questions here. It's great to be here with everyone for the first X-Series show of the year 2021, which is going to be obviously a challenging year, but together we might find new ways and means to communicate with each other. And, it goes from the top down and the bottom up, because at the very top, the president now has been prevented from communicating with 90 million of his followers. And that's an affront by any stretch of the imagination. Can you imagine a company in another country taking down the leader, like Boris Johnson, them removing Boris Johnson? And it's funny, we were taking some flack from some other leaders, and it was like Scott Morrison of Australia, he's like, I can't believe the terrible things in the United States right now. I'm like, dude, you're building COVID camps. Okay? You slipped so far over into fascism, you can't even say a whimper. Vladimir Putin, who gets a real bum rap in America. And that's too bad, because they set him up as a straw man because they wanted to have something to use against Trump. But then he comes out and he's like, America's system needs reform. I'm like, look, you run around poisoning your opponents, okay? You do not, if you want to say, hey, I hope things go better over there, that's fine. But don't give us a holier than thou from Russia. That's ridiculous. China, you've got your own slave population. You're trying to make us slaves too? And who do these people think they are? Really think about it. Boris Johnson is locking down his own people.
I heard the word
phenomenal.
allowed today in the Nigel Farage video, and I really thought about that. Allowed, right?
Yes.
Like somehow it really stuck out to me, going, what the hell do you mean allowed?
Well, Nigel Farage was the UK leader who brought us Brexit and all those different things. And he comes over here and, he's very aware of the political situation over here. But it is phenomenal. The things that he's pulling out, he said, don't go for a police state, because they have locked Britain back down. And, it's very interesting because when I looked at this, when this started to first happen, the COVID thing, I talked to a lot of experts, doctors, people, and smart people. Dr. Bagich, we did a show with him. I wanted to know what was going on. I wasn't here to just dismiss the official version of this thing. And I think even in the case of Trump and things like that, when they laid this on him, but the story itself falls apart on a lot of different levels. So my original advice to everyone was, work with the middle managers, the governors and the peons who have to go through the motions of saying this stuff. But they've had their time. And Cuomo used it to become a king and to destroy his citizens and their businesses. This is what they did with it. Gretchen Whitmer acted like a psychopath and told people they couldn't buy seeds. Gavin Newsom, he lived up to Nancy's psychopathy. That's his aunt. And, what did he do? He created the most draconian law. He destroyed California. Everyone is leaving California.
Guess who's going to buy it up?
The Chinese?
Yes. On the
Well, I don't know. This is interesting. The government in China has a lot of problems. By the way, Chinese people are some of the greatest people on the planet. And let's never forget that when we're dealing with this incredible repressive government over there, because they're just a very unethical group at the top, and we find ourselves with our own unethical groups here at the top. Yes.
David Tormina, DJ, how do recent events relate to Elon Musk becoming the richest man in the world? Is Musk with Trump or Biden?
Well, I did a show on Musk and Hughes, and it gets us into much deeper territory, but just superficially, he is someone who has stepped forward, and when he's gotten out of line, they basically have shown how they would unravel him. And then he comes back, reassembles himself, and marches along to their tune. The fact that they made him the richest man in the world, he's a real Hughes analogy. And I think that he has shown the ability at times to be a loose cannon or a bull in a china shop. And at times that's been good, but the thing is about Elon is he believes now in all the stuff he used to warn against, like artificial intelligence, and now he wants to open up your skull and put a sensor in it. Just if you're totally healthy, it's absurd. So he's bought into all that, and now he wants to be the spaceman president on Mars. I think the company innovation around something like a SpaceX, that's a company that should have started in 1972. This is what I think is really remarkable when we look at it. What was it that took place after we stopped the moon landing program? Because our last time to the moon was 72. That's the last manned mission, okay? So what's the deal? How do you lose 50 years like that? So it seems to me Musk's story should have happened in the 70s or 80s. There should have been a Musk back there, and all of that stuff that they were talking about. We're going to have outposts on the moon, and we're going to have Mars and all that. They just backed away from all of it. They developed a totally clandestine structure, and boom. Now you have people going up there, and it's like the privatization of space, but really what they're under is, I don't think there's a whole lot of freedom in that. I think they basically do what the government says, and maybe that's a good life, setting off rockets and being the richest man in the world. But for me, yeah, it's hard to take a lot of these people seriously when on one hand they're like, and he throws mud in the eye of the whole coronavirus thing at times, and for that I give him credit. But then you're going to sign on with AI thinking you can put your consciousness in a little box, and the whole transhumanist aspect of that is exactly the problem that we have. The Biden thing, the Kamala Harris thing, that's all transhumanism. The World Economic Foundation, absorbing you into the Borg. You don't get to own any property by 2030, but don't worry, we'll take care of you until we don't need you. And, so this is, I guess is a long way of saying it's an unusual situation, because I don't think that he can say what's on his mind.
Ed Kaufman, if we are to accept that Eisenhower established a relationship with ETs, And do the ETs have a current relationship with key COG officials?
Well, I did an episode called COG and UFO a couple of months ago, which addresses this, but I need to do more because I'm finding out more about that. And I think that we have to remember in the middle of all this, if you think the COVID op was something, wait till you get to the UFO invasion op, which we've called out from companies like To the Stars Academy, which is all a CIA executive board. And we know that Lou Elizondo quit TTSA, remarkably. And also, so did Mr. Mellon, because Mellon probably thinks he's going on to the Biden administration. But this is interesting. I think that part of their op on the TTSA side has collapsed. I think that they're looking for new avenues. And spoiler alert here, I think I've found their new avenue. But I'm going to confirm it and then I'll come back. Okay, keep going.
Gerald King, so when did they butcher the Treasury bond market and the dollar?
Well, they're working on the digital currency aspect, the incredible pump and dump around Bitcoin. You know, I mean, there are people in our field who know money really well. Fitz is one of them, of course, Nomi Prince and others. But they're angling for that, and they're doing it as saying, oh, there's all this debt, but don't worry, you know. They have that incredible meme out there, and it's like a mousetrap and a piece of cheese, and it says debt forgiveness, and then the mouse is just about to go into it. That's what they're trying to do with 7 billion people on the planet. I don't know, you know, it's interesting for all of their plans. One of the things that Catherine Fitz has pointed out is that she does not think that they're going to succeed. And that makes it all the more imperative for us to set up an alternative. 2 more questions.
Frank Monday,
Yes.
who lives in Beijing, said China has already abandoned paper currency nearly entirely.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. You know, it's interesting. I was looking at numbers for this just before the COVID thing hit. And I reviewed how people were adopting digital currency and not using cash anymore. And they had made gains on that, but they had not made the kind of gains that they wanted to make. And so what they ended up doing was creating this situation, the COVID thing, where it was like, oh, you know, it's uncouth to pass money. Just use your card instead. And so those numbers of digital interaction have boosted dramatically with this. So they're accomplishing a lot with the COVID operation. It's remarkable, but it also is falling apart. So they have to figure out what to do. Do they go for the Biden full-on lockdown a la Boris Johnson? Or, you know, do they get taken out for fraud? I mean, it's pretty interesting. Does the whole thing fall apart? It seems to me it's interesting. A great survey came out recently, which was done by a responsible pollster, and they found that people fundamentally found that Fauci and the government were not giving them the truth in relation to the coronavirus. So they're starting to see the economic opportunities for these people, and they do not. I mean, they resent like hell being locked down. I don't think they would ever go for it again. I think you'd have a real pushback against society like you've never seen. Yes.
Osto Space wants to know, with NASA and Musk and Bezos still using almost 100-year-old solid rocket booster tech and POTUS declassified anti-gravity propulsion system in 2019, why are we not hearing about them or someone building a Jetson mobile?
It's true. You're only hearing about, hey, advanced rockets. They have such incredible technology, and you know, it's interesting to me because Trump talking about the F-35 and the invisible technology was a hint of that. The development of the Space Force lets us know they were ready to, you know, it's the avenue for coming out and saying this is what we have. So it's a mystery that hangs there in midair. We know that the Space Force was part of it, but I'll tell you this, I've now seen 3 mainstream media articles tearing apart the Space Force and how Biden should scrap it. Now this is interesting because the Space Force, because it was created by Trump, probably has Trump loyalists inside. And so they need to figure out, is there a way we can run that thing, or do we just scrap it and go back to our kind of seedy secret version. There's something going on there. And so I think they're looking at, can they take over Space Force, or is the Trump imprint too much on there? Every time they say Space Force, you'll think of Trump, and he'll be saying, you know, Biden's a loser. And so, you know, go ahead.
This is a statement, not a question, but I'd like you to answer it. Tricky Vicky says, our government has declared war upon us. A lot of people are realizing that. What do they do? People, that's the question, is what do we do now that we've had this realization? We can't trust them. The terms have changed. The relationship has changed.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Well, they're trying to move fast. The election was a big part of that. The COVID push in 2020 was a big part of that. The new normal ideas, which is complete BS. The Great Reset, which is actually known as the going direct reset. The whole great thing is that they got great society. Hey, we'll just throw great in there. But that's all, you know, it's anti-human. And so those things aren't going to work. And this is what they needed to roll out and roll out fast. So it was a race against us catching on to who they are, researching their past and putting them in the proper context, and then putting this infrastructure in place. And now we're facing off against each other. And we're saying, we know who you are, Bill Gates, and we know who the Rockefellers are. And we know you're controlling the political scene. And they're saying, it doesn't matter, we own the technology, you know, the people in the middle will listen to us, and we'll promise them, you know, a universal basic income or some nonsense while we scrap their businesses, and they'll go on our side. And by the way, if you oppose us, we'll throw you off social media, we'll damage your reputation. If you're the president of the United States and you have throngs of crowds, we'll roll out a little old man and make him president, just to show how powerful we are. And if you don't like that, we'll light your cities on fire and call it social justice, you know. So it's a weird thing. We're facing off against each other. It's funny, Fitz has come up a few times tonight, I think, and it's interesting because she thinks that we are in a war. And when you look around at what's taking place, this is like Jews in Germany looking around at each other and saying, well, what are they going to do next? Oh, they take it. Did they take that right away? What happened? What do you mean? I can't have a phone anymore? I have to display a yellow star in my store window? I have to reduce my hours? You know, this is what it feels like. And it's funny because we've been warned for a long time that the people who are creating the pharmaceutical companies and aspects of the deep state, there's a huge Nazi influence, and they're using very Nazi-ish tactics. It's like a very strange interplay of communist East Berlin and East Germany and the original Nazi Germany. It's like a weird combination of the two. So definitely we've become more self-reliant. And you were talking about that too, which is being more physically fit, more physically aware.
It's controlling the things that you can.
Yes.
And doing it quickly. There's no more time for procrastination. Get on it. January's the time everybody gets, they detox, they go on diets and stuff. We need to take it to the umpteenth level and be more fit than we ever have. I made a little note about The Empire Strikes Back, which David Tormina tweeted out this week. And
I was just gonna announce the new Dark Journalist exercise show.
And
that'll keep me on YouTube.
It really does feel like The Empire Strikes Back. And like, you know, what do you do, right? Like, we're just little people here. Ultimately, I hate to say it, it's a little cheesy, but you know, it's self-mastery. I mean, become the Jedi that you were meant to be, right? At least that's what I'm telling myself, yes. Right? And so that's, you know, body, mind, and spirit. I know what my weakness is. I know where I need to develop. You know, that's all we can do, and get busy doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to take something, that's right on. I'm going to take something from the Gurdjieff work. And this is very tricky in the time that we're in. But they went through the Russian Revolution, which is very similar to what we're seeing here. Lots of false starts, lots of consolidation, and lots of wild stories about things that were going to happen, and then they did. And then incredible repression and so on by the psychos who ran that. But there was a thing in the Gurdjieff work about identification. And this is what I think I see over and over again. I lay out a number of facts for somebody who's intelligent. And I say, here's what the New World Order is doing, because they asked me. And they say, how can I get into more about this? But if I get into something that's like a red line for them, like Biden didn't win the election or something, then they're like, oh, does that mean that like this is for Trump? And it's like, they're stuck. And this is what identification is about. You're stuck identifying. You can't hear facts anymore. So many people are like that in this society because they're propagandized nonstop. What did Gurdjieff and Ouspensky notice in that revolution? Everybody was mind controlled. That's before they had entrainment technology, television even. It was 1917. And the key that they figured out was identification. If people are over-identified, if I've been propagandized and I have to hate this enemy, I'll never get to think straight. So identification is something we can control. If I can look, I've never identified myself with any political party. If I can look at Democrats on the left and Republicans on the right and libertarians in the middle and Green Party people, and we have them all on this show. You've got Professor Peter Dale Scott from the left coast, but he knows more about the deep state than all of the people on the right I've ever talked to. RFK Jr., centrist Democrat, certainly family tradition of Democrats. Naomi Wolf, hardcore leftist. These people get it, though. Number of people in the middle and on the right get it. So it takes all points of view. We can't identify one and say, I don't like you because you voted Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. Or if you say, oh yeah, well you supported Donald Trump, so therefore you got what's coming to you, and it's good that we have masks on, and I hope Joe Biden does put me in a gulag. It's like weird. You just want to get back at the thing because you want to get back at Trump because he reminds you of your dad or something. I don't know. But it's wrong identification. All you need to know is which political figure is working in the interest of the Constitution and populism. Because populism is about us and who we are, and that's what the transhumanists want to get rid of. And they've consolidated their power. And they know how to give you enemies. Just like they know sports. They know how to give you enemies in sports, so you sign up. I'll never forget, I'm going to share this experience. It's a weird one, okay? When I was 16, I was snuck into a bar by a group of friends, and there was a New England Patriots Miami Dolphins game going on, and tensions ran high in that game because the Patriots were losing. And I was drinking, for 16, I was kind of drinking a lot, actually, so I became unusually aware of my circumstances. And this quarterback threw a pass, and there was passing interference or whatever, and they felt completely that they had been screwed over by this decision. And people were getting up to the television in the bar, which hung, they shouldn't have done it this way, but they hung it in where the patrons were, and they were knocking on the helmet of the guy on the TV. They were punching the helmet of the guy. And I was like, he's never going to feel it. 1, 2, it's not going to change the outcome of the game for sure. And 3, you look like an idiot. So this always stayed with me, though, because that's real identification, and that's what we see a lot when they talk about Trump derangement syndrome and stuff. That's what I think of. I think that people have been brought into this state. And we used to see, they did it with Hillary, who really, was a criminal on the stage, had a criminal past, with her husband, but they also, they created this image of Hillary so everyone could just go after Hillary, and they will do it with, you know, it goes round and round, basically. You can always find a political figure to hate, and it's like 2 minutes hate. Remember 1984, they give you 2 minutes hate, and you go out and they give you the big screens, and it would say, Goldstein did this to us. He's feeding our information to the enemy now, and then they actually replace the face of Goldstein talking with bleeding sheep, and people would freak out, and then they play out the brainwashing, they go back to their lives and feel normal again. They give us 2 minutes hate, and we have to be careful of that identification. Just like they're giving the liberals right now this false story about Trump people being deranged. I can tell you, if you were in a Trump crowd during a rally or something, you wouldn't feel like those are deranged people. You know, they're just a good group of people. It's like going to a baseball game. So, you know, but they have to make those people the enemy because they're being paid to do that. That's all there is to it. So do you really want to be, you know, you have to ask yourself what you want to be. It's funny, there's a guy, and I'm going to call him by name. I should usually leave names up, and we'll call this one. There's a good JFK researcher, and his name is James DiEugenio. And he's done all this stuff about the Kennedy assassination, how the CIA was involved, and Kennedy's policy toward Cuba and all the rest. But like so many people who are JFK investigators, they are so fixated that they don't realize, they're so fixated against people like Trump that they don't realize that the deep state who eliminated President Kennedy is the same deep state that's trying to get rid of Trump. It's simple. If you investigate it, and I've investigated it for years, it's the same exact group. So the Central Intelligence Agency, if they want to get rid of somebody like Kennedy, then you spend your whole life writing books and saying how wrong that they were for doing this, because it's a horrible atrocity. But then you turn around and you look at them trying to get rid of Trump, and you're like, that deep state, they're hunky-dory for me. And I see that incredible hypocrisy in these JFK researchers, and I'm like, you didn't learn anything. I mean, I would say that to myself too, don't get me wrong. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm great because I can see this better, but it's, you know, the point is, you're against the CIA because of what? Because they subvert the rule of law, and they become a small group controlling a nation, programming them, harvesting them, doing terrible things. That's why you're against them, right? Why would you ever root for them to take down a precedent that you don't like? It's not, it doesn't add up. It's not reasonable. You have over-identified. That's why the Gurdjieff-Ouspensky work is so valuable. That's what I would look forward to in 2021, is less identification, more getting to the point. Yes, last question.
All right, everybody is like, what about Pence? Pence, Pence, Pence.
Did you read your
please.
quote about the Jedi? Empire Strikes Back? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, no, it's pretty, it's pretty clear. The thing is, Pence is basically for the Republican Party, and I don't think that, you know, he's part of that kind of Lindsey Graham-ish group. They're sort of Midland Republicans, and Trump dragged him on board because it was sort of a trade-off there, and he was somebody who didn't take up a lot of space. But I think that Pence, you know, certainly acted unusual in this situation around the voting struggle, and I think that he should have certainly stood up more, especially in the early cases around the voter fraud thing. I think the Supreme Court should have investigated the irregularities around the vote in 7 states, and they failed, and the legislatures in those states, there were some good people who tried, and there were some good legislatures. There were even people who stood up. Remember, when this whole event happened at the Capitol, what were they debating? Voter irregularities. That was the whole point. They were saying, well, there are irregularities, let's vote on it in Arizona. Good, put everyone on the record. If you supported the, you know, if you support the outcome of votes that are in question, then you're on the record at least. It's something. But that's what part of this process when they all ran out and all that, they had to stop doing that. And when they came back, they're demoralized, right? Because then you're going to be called a terrorist, you know? So it's clever stuff. And then they kept them there to 4 o'clock in the morning. It's just really weird. And then Mayor Bowser, that's quite a name, you know, she instantly calls this emergency until after Biden gets in. I mean, it's looking like a banana republic. And that has nothing to do with what Trump is doing. I'm sorry. If you're a big Trump hater and can't wait for Biden to come in, you know, you have your own opinion, but the banana republic part is all on the other side right now. And on the other side of Trump, I mean, those are Republicans and Democrats, because he's representing that populism in the middle. And that just has to be recognized, whether you like him or appreciate his policies or not. Those are the forces that are in play. And we can't over-identify just because it feels good to hate Goldstein. All right, last question.
Yeah, okay. Victrola 13 wanted to know, what's the status of NSAM 57?
It got activated on January 5th. And
what now? What since?
The Pentagon is not supporting the Central Intelligence Agency as of January 5th. In clandestine operations, which means in places like Yemen and all that, their agents are getting the hell out because without Pentagon support, they're sitting ducks. And don't think that the incident around January 6th, after the January 5th adjustment to the CIA took place, you know, a lot of the action looks really like a cooked agent provocateur CIA activity. There's no question about it. So was that immediate revenge? It was a good opportunity. Interesting timing all around. So NSAM 57 was activated on November 18th and on January 5th took effect. And if another administration got in, can they reverse it? Yes, but from January 5th forward, currently, it's not, which may also relate to Trump's future plans. It's quite possible. And, you know, regardless of which side of the fence you come down on, if you think, well, we certainly could do better with government than Trump, and you know, favor somebody on the other side of the fence, all that matters is that we follow the Constitution. And, you know, if we get one candidate that we like in, great. But the bottom line is that we all need to follow the Constitution on a government level. And when they don't, they need to be called out. And when they do this kind of censorship, you know, that needs to be addressed by the government because they're censoring the president of the United States, regardless of what party that is. That's wrong, you know, and we have to live up to that regardless. Wow. So everyone, this has been the Dark Journalist X Year 1 episode, COG Command Control Communications. And it's been great seeing so many people, familiar faces.
Let me throw you one more question.
Sure.
Okay, I really wanted to fit this one in. So MTRYP. How do we tell our family/close friends the seriousness of what's transpiring? They don't see the censorship at all because they're hooked into mainstream sources. They're also under incredible mind control, watching and propaganda every night when they watch the news. How do we break through?
Well, you are a real expert on this, actually.
You don't. I've given up. I think you can. I think 2020, a lot of people just taking the temperature of Twitter were desperately trying to wake people up. I think that with 2021, that's over, that phase. It's almost there. You kind of have to give up on friends and family members. If they come around later, forgive them and move on and invite them in, you know, to our world. But we have to get busy, I hate to say it, saving ourselves and preparing the new world, the other option, because we're not going to go down this authoritarian, totalitarian path that they're planning for us. So we need to create something else. Everybody's talking about buying land, and some are talking about tax protests. I mean, there's things that are going to pop up, ideas are going to happen. And we can't keep spending time trying to wake family members up when they are under mind, when they actually keep going back for more mind control every damn night. It's not going to work.
It is, that's a very draining exercise for sure.
Well, we stagnate. We don't move forward if we're doing
I
that.
think it is lead by example in any situation. And the only thing, you know, there's so many good resources around. And I always recommend, you know, the people who are on the show, Catherine Austin Fitz, Dr. Joseph Farrell, Alexander Bruce at Forbidden Knowledge TV, Gigi Young's work. You know, there's a brain trust. The work is there, it's available. And it's up to, you can lead a horse to water, but they have to drink it. It's really true. They need to engage with it. They need to come to that crisis in their own understanding. Here's how Fitz described it, and I believe it. She said, it used to be, you had the official reality, and then the real thing, and down the middle was, you know, this middle of the road where you didn't have to actually adjust to either side. You could either buy the official fantasy reality, or you could look into some of the deeper stuff, the dark journalism. And people could survive in that middle of the road. But now the middle of the road's gone. There is no middle of the road. So either you're going to be in the fantasy reality, or you're going to be in the searching reality with the real answers, seeing things as they really are. That's the benefit of the transparency of all the idea sharing that we've done. There is an incredible volume of information. There is no middle of the road anymore. So those people are going to be sorely disappointed if they thought they could hang out in the middle of the road. They can either join the official reality or work for a new reality. It's either, you know, see things as they really are. So it's either the two. There's so many of us and so many different idiosyncrasies and ways of looking at things. I know that that's generalizing, but I think it's important that there's been a shift. There's been a change. And if that middle of the road is gone for us, then we have to look forward and see what are the opportunities. And joining the official reality is about the worst idea, because the people who are creating this reality for us, they don't value human life very highly. And as we've learned, they believe in slavery. So we need to find our own answers. And we have the brain power and the brain trust to do it. But I think, and it goes back to some of the questions that got raised here, you know, fundamentally, what we're looking at is shock and awe. But now, instead of the Iraqis being hit, it's the American people. And, you know, the shock and awe, instead of bombs, is technological control of every aspect of their lives. So we need to learn how to resist that. And the first resistance is not buying into, you know, the kind of stories that they feed us. Like, oh, those terrible people storming the Capitol and all these other people who blew up cities all summer are great. You know, that kind of psychosis. So we learn to study the situation and make informed, wise decisions, and work with each other and get good ideas from each other. That's what the Ideas Room is all about. And I'll tell you, it has not failed us. Everyone.
I'm sorry, everybody's like, Lynn Wood? Like, would you comment?
No, that's another one. Look, there was a whole General Flynn Wood. There was a whole group, Sidney Powell. There was a group that just got thrown off of Twitter and just pumped down, you know, and they always love making fun of Sidney Powell in all of these stories. And Powell is being sued by Dominion Software for $1.3 billion. I think I started the show with that. Think about that. How nervous are they about her? Just like when you see that over-anxious panic about getting Trump out by the 20th. Just like when a very respected columnist from Newsweek loses his mind in order to tell me that his source was not identified. When all I said to him, look, this is your source. COG Commander O'Shaughnessy was your source. I have never seen someone in that position just flip out so fast. He flipped out within like 30 seconds. So that's how it works. So you have to learn to read those things. But it's quite phenomenal. And I think that all these people, I listen to all of them and I write everything that they say down. And I take a look and I weigh the pros and cons of some of the things that they're saying. And, you know, it's interesting because you find pathways if you have the time for it and you start to learn, someone very smart who I admire recommended that I watch this guy who everyone knows, who's been in these kind of circles before, who talks about being a contactee, but now he talks all about political issues. And I just don't believe him. So, it's funny, I wouldn't waste my time. I mean, I would listen anyway, but I just wouldn't waste my time investing anything in it because that was my take on it. I think it's very important too that we not waste time chasing down blind alleys. So we have to be able to identify true information from, blue chicken fluff, for example. Everyone, it's been a great time and excellent questions. My God, fantastic.
That was about half of them, by the way.
Well, we'll take more. We'll come back strong, and we're going to be tracking everything that's going on. And as I see everything developing, I'm going to be doing those reports. If I think I can give you some insight that is not already out there. Otherwise, you just see on Friday at 8 o'clock until they decide we're going to pull the plug on DJ because you just can't let that radical information get out about Gurdjieff and Steiner and Edgar Casey. It's too much. But that's what we do here at the X Show, which is, it is not, it's the deep state and then it's the deep state of mind, because we're going deep into the esoteric aspects. That's what the X steganography is all about. And we have to cover the political stuff to understand at crucial turns in history like this, to understand what it is. But we know it's a much bigger picture than just traditional straight ahead politics. Not by a long shot is that just what's going on. And so that the spiritual aspect, the psychospiritual aspects, the esoteric aspects, and the deep learning, all those things work together. And that's what's so fascinating. I really appreciate the questions tonight. I'm going to do a couple of quick shout outs. And it's just great stuff tonight.
I have a ton of people to thank.
Oh, yes. Let's start there.
Okay. So Michael Baer, this is going to take a while. John Doe, MC, H. Bohan, Joseph Fabry, Kim Woodrum, Irie A, Donnie Darko 727, Carol Crumlish, Kat DF, Eurythmy is Fun, Josh Randall, David Pritchard, Vern Baumgardner, Jordan Romew, Doreen Hewitt, Gil and Joy R, a cult fan, Shashakila, Charles Marlowe, Stephen Talbot, Refi00, Brian Berner, B. Brax, Norma White, Cursacella, James Clements, Thermobsterful, Patrick McGrath, Sean Jock, T-Max7, Channeling the Heart, Barbara Joyce, Bethany Green, H. Hale, Mammoth Wiener, Angel P, Osto Space, John Thayer Sr., I0N3W0LF Company.
It's like a
Wayne
George Lucas
Peak.
movie.
I know, and Wayne Peak. And I think that's it. If I forgot anybody, please forgive me. It was moving really fast tonight.
What a tremendous amount of support. We really appreciate it. And of course, it keeps us going to deliver these reports for you. And so we really appreciate that. And our subscribers, just tremendous, keeping us engaged in this fight for deeper levels of information. And it is a battle at times, and other times it's quite a pleasure. But I think we're at such a point where we all need that deeper insight and deeper information. And on some level, we are all giving it back and forth to each other. And I want to say a shout out to Carol Crumlish, because she's been a great supporter of the show. I
Absolutely.
really do appreciate that, and all the people who helped us out. The country is going through something remarkable, and we all need to keep ourselves in the frame of mind of trying to be helpful. Of course, the world is going through it as well. A lot of things are centered right now in America, but we're seeing this all over the world. We've been seeing protests go on for the past few years, even before the COVID thing happened, France and other places. We are in the phase of transformation. And, as Kennedy said, we'll all get through. And that's something to really consider. But we have to call things as we see them. And if we get thrown off platforms for doing that, that's just the cost of doing business. Because when you do this, you either decide to be honest or you go home. And in this case, we're just giving you the straight truth. And if the platforms can handle it, so much the better. But the indications tonight from them trashing Trump's Twitter is that no, they want the lockdown censorship world. And so we're going to be at odds on that, but we'll keep delivering reports to you, going across the board and making sure that these things happen, because we need to get the information out. And regardless of the platforms, we're going to get the information out to you. We're going to use our brains and intelligence to find ways and means to get the information to you. A couple of shout outs here. Irie A, it's great to see you. Frank Castle, Scarlet Fire, Thought Seeker, great, Marco Zerpa, Danielle Jorgensen, Nate, Gary Walter, a cult fan. Najat did a nice piece after going on a trip recently. She did a nice piece. Frank Monday, it's great to see you. Gypsy Moon, Brandy Renee, Corky Goss, wow, just fantastic crew in there tonight. Tim James, Bo Krills, the man, the myth, fantastic. I know Kate's out there tonight. It's great to see you. Scarlet Fire, Kennedy Dry, that's not interesting. Silver Fox, Anthony Van Zant, fantastic crowd out there tonight. We had Dr. Joseph Farrell, fantastic. Giza Death Star, of course. And we're going to talk to Joseph. It was just trading messages back and forth, but we need to get you back on the show ASAP, pronto, sir, in a breakaway civilization minute. And also Gigi Young, of course, incredible work. And we're going to have Gigi back on very shortly. We need the real overview on this from the deeper level, and that's what we can get. We will see you all next week, and hang in there for the weekend. And if there's anything that goes down, we'll be here with special reports, giving you that information and breaking it down as best we can. But terrific to see you. Constance Todd Smith, it's great to see you as well. We will see you all. Jonathan Fries, Scruples, fantastic. We will see you all next Friday for X Series 100.
Maybe.
Roosevelt, it's good to see you, sir. Brenda Fisher. We will see you all soon, and have a great night. And remember, it says end broadcast. Oh, I'm under Carly from Dimensions and Beyond was out there too. Bruce Ross. Groovy, fantastic. Yes. Mm-hmm. It says end broadcast, but it never really ends, right? I know Bruce Morgan was out there. It's great to see you. Charles Marlowe. Oh, it's a great crew. Fantastic ideas from tonight. Have a great weekend. We love you.
Stay positive. Keep your sense of humor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Fracknoy. I'm the Emeritus Chair of Astronomy here at Foothill College, and it's my pleasure to welcome everyone here in the Smithwick Theater and everyone listening to us at home to this special talk in the 19th Annual Silicon Valley Astronomy Lectures. Tonight's talk is about water worlds in our solar system. I'm delighted to report that this series